Hi everybody, welcome back. It's been a little while since we've been on the channel, so hopefully you're still enjoying the content that's out there. And a lot of you will be interested to know that the new version of Adobe Captivate has dropped this week. What we've decided to do is we're going to take an unscripted first impressions look at the software. Look, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I have had a sneak peek over the last few months, having been part of the pre-release beta team. I have been able to have a bit of a play with it, but this is certainly the first look at the official release version on the Adobe website. Now, one thing I have noticed, so I've just been doing a little bit of testing just to prepare, but not a lot. One thing I did notice is that when I go to launch Captivate normally, so this is the new version of Captivate. I'll talk about the previous version as well because that plays a part in this journey of the new version. But just quickly, when I just go to launch it, I do get an error. Without going through and uninstalling it and then reinstalling it and things like that, what I have discovered is a bit of a workaround for now, which shouldn't be needed, but if I right mouse click on the icon and then choose the option to run as administrator. Now, normally in the past, if you wanted to use Captivate to record your screen, so if you wanted to use the screen recording and the demo recording part of Captivate, you did have to run as an administrator. Because Captivate is recording your screen with possible potential sensitive information on there, you did have to provide administrator access for that. So I am used to running Captivate as from an administrator perspective. That's in the Windows version. So as soon as I run it as administrator, it fires up. So that's great. Hi everybody, I'm trying this again because of some things that happened yesterday while I was trying this. So let's have a look. I'm going to launch Captivate, similar to how I did yesterday. So first of all, let's have a look at clicking on the actual icon just by itself. There we go. Something's happening. I just did this before and nothing happened. So I didn't even not even getting the error message that I did yesterday. And I'm going to now try it again with a right mouse click, more, and then run as administrator, and hopefully you'll see that. Click yes, and let's see if anything happens. What I might also do is I'm going to actually open up the file location, and I'm just going to see if I can run it from the file location, because there might be something wrong with the shortcut. And that isn't working either. Let's try running it as administrator. Probably the thing to notice with this is it may be a little bit problematic when trying to open it. That could be a reflection of my computer. My computer is 32 gig of RAM. It is an old computer. It is a Dell M6800. It certainly has the grunt, but I'm running Windows 10 operating system, if that means anything. But we did get it open. I was nearly going to restart my computer, but let's try again. So welcome everybody. This is our initial look at the new Adobe Captivate. This is unscripted. This is straight out of the box. I've had a little bit of a play with it already, so I've got a little bit of an idea of how I'm going to work through this little chat, but it's essentially just me thinking out aloud as I'm exploring the new release for Adobe Captivate. Just to also remind you, if you or to let you know that you install Adobe Captivate, the new version of Adobe Captivate, alongside the previous version, which is Adobe Captivate 2019, which Adobe are calling Adobe Captivate Classic. The reason for this is you cannot open legacy files or files that were created in earlier versions of Captivate in this new version of Captivate. So you will need to run both versions side by side, especially if you're making changes to existing files that you've already created. So we'll explore that in more detail later on, but let's just dive straight into it. Here's the splash screen. We do have some featured templates which are presented for us to explore. I'm going to go straight in, open up one of those featured templates. I have had a bit of a play with both of these templates already, but I'm just going to open up a brand new file based on one of these templates, and let's dive in and explore. So a couple of things that I've noticed so far when opening these files: can take a little while. That's okay, as I said, I've got 32 gigabyte of RAM, got a decent video card, got plenty of storage, but some newer computers may be a little bit quicker in responding to things like launching Captivate, opening up a file. And what we're just about to explore as well is that when we go to preview, which I'm going to preview straight away, let's preview this file to first of all see how Captivate is now handling the whole process behind previewing, because it is quite different to what you might be used to. There's a couple of things to be mindful of here. So first of all, you'll notice that the preview button is broken into two parts. You've got the word preview, and then you've got three little dots. And as we know, three little dots will give us more options, which we're going to go into in a moment. But let's just click on the preview button by itself. What I've noticed in the past, I have clicked on that already. What I've noticed is when you click on it, it can take a little while to launch, but I am noticing, having done this probably about 3 or 4 times now in the last couple of days, that it does feel like it's getting a little bit quicker with previewing in the browser. So when you go to preview, just click once, just be patient, let it do its thing, and it will launch. What I also found yesterday when I was doing this was initially the preview opened up in the browser behind Captivate. So I actually had to move Captivate out of the way, and there were about 5 tabs all with the same preview in there because I actually clicked the preview button a couple of times. So if you do click the preview button multiple times, you will get multiple tabs popping up. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's have a look and see what the preview experience is like. So once again, Captivate is creating its own temporary server. And you'll see here up in the web address, it says HTTP localhost. Now this is really important to appreciate because there's certain functionality that you can incorporate into Captivate, which will only work if it's being experienced from a web server, which is an HTTP location. If you're previewing your files, your Captivate files via your C drive or your local drive, you may lose some functionality depending on what you have incorporated into your project. So it's always a good idea to preview your files via the proper preview option here, or even better still, if you can upload it to a web server and test it from there, or even test it via a learning management system as well. Let's have a look and see what the preview looks like. So a couple of things we are probably used to, which may look a little bit different. We've got a play bar down the bottom, which we'll explore further on. We can obviously click on next to take us to the next slide. We've got stock standard buttons, which we're probably used to. We can collapse the play bar, which is great. Can we move it out of the way? As the end user, that is great. So as the end user, we do have the ability of being able to move this around. This is a new feature, and this might be worth communicating as part of your initial onboarding of your files, just so the end user is appreciative that you can do that. Can you get rid of it? It doesn't look like it, but you can certainly move it around. If you are going to allow people to move it around, then you may want to make sure that you've got nothing on the screen that could be hidden as a result of the play bar being moved around. So that's not bad. That's a pretty good feature. We've got our table of contents, which interestingly, a couple of things that I've noticed before is that, I'm just going to close this down for a minute. Let's have a look and see what happens if we move the play bar back down the bottom. Where does the table of contents open up? On the right hand side by default. So just be mindful of that. It's not on the left-hand side like it was before. And we can close it, obviously pressing the menu button or the X over here. If we move the play bar over to the right somewhere, and then open up the TOC. The TOC, or table of contents, will open up on the left. So interesting. Some interesting updates to that functionality, which take it or leave it, I guess, and we can explore that more as we dive into the features in more detail later on. A couple of other things to notice. We've got some options up in the top here with regards to how this content can be displayed in the viewable area. So the first button is our fill screen button, which will allow us to fill the screen. That's great. And we can collapse that back, or we can go back to the normal view like we did with the desktop view. Just to highlight here that even though we're looking at it full screen or desktop mode, it's still scalable. So you'll notice that if I change the size of the window, that it will scale to a degree. So there's a certain element of scaling. But on top of that as well, as we are scaling, which we may not have experienced before, we do have the option of scrolling down. So there is this scrollable functionality naturally built into the experience, which we're going to get to in detail later on as well. So there's some cool little things just slipping in under the radar here, just to be mindful of. So depending on how the person's viewing the content, they will be able to scroll up and down through there. Let's maximize that screen again. Obviously, we've got our tablet view, which will display in tablet mode, which is portrait, obviously. Once again, as we are in tablet mode, we can scroll, and you can see the scroll bar appearing over there on the right hand side. And of course, we do have mobile view as well. We've got mobile portrait, and we've also got mobile landscape, which is scrollable as well. So some fantastic out of the box, immediate, no work really required. In previous versions of Captivate, if we wanted to create mobile or responsive solutions, there was a whole other area that we needed to go into, but that's not the case anymore, which we'll explore in more detail as we go. So let's go back to desktop mode. Let's just have a look and see this file. Okay, so we've got some pretty basic animations, builds, transitions, whatever you want to call them. We'll explore these in a moment in more detail. Of course, we can can we use any keyboards? No keyboard shortcuts here. Okay, that's fine. Page down, page up. Nope, there's no keyboard shortcuts available at the moment. Let's see if that's possible. So we'll make a note. Can we use keyboard shortcuts by default against the Playbar, or will we have to incorporate keyboard navigation as part of our development? Let's keep going. That was nice. Some nice animations there. Some good graphics. Be interesting to see how these elements are actually built. Something happened there. Not quite sure what happened there. Let's just double check. Okay, so we've got meet the team, and something happened. Yeah, okay. Interesting. Is that, maybe that was the next slide anyway? No, so something's happening within this slide as it's moving along the timeline to actually display. I'm not clicking anywhere to make that happen. Looks like it's just happening as part of the timeline experience. That's fine, that's paused, so it's obviously reached the end of that screen. Let's go to the next screen. A few other transitions, a few other fade-ins. That was an animation just there. Fantastic. Some stock standard stuff, nothing too out of the way. Let's dive into it, shall we? Let's see what's going on. Here's a tab. Okay, I'm assuming that there's a lot of these elements will be out of the box, which we won't need to build individually. Here's some flip cards. I would like to think that these are out of the box now. This is where we've got to be careful with the Playbar, obstructing any functionality. So just be mindful that your design is not going to get hidden by any Playbar functionality as well. Okay, so some great little flip cards there, which we obviously needed to do manually in the olden days, but there might be a component for that now. Interesting. Okay, let's get back to Captivate and let's have a look and see what's going on. So we're now back in Adobe Captivate, looking at that file that we have just previewed. What I would like to show you, something which is pretty cool, is we can preview this in an actual browser. So what we're going to look at is we're going to generate a device preview. Okay, now this is quite cool. So what we can do, you need to make sure you're on the same network or the same Wi-Fi network, and you can grab your QR code scanner on your phone and you can open up a link. And if you're on the same Wi-Fi network, you will now see that it has opened that file up on my phone. Hopefully you can see that. So that's pretty cool. And then we can just go through that as we would normally, which is quite nice. So some real instant, quick opportunities to preview in different devices, which is great. So let's have a look and see what's going on here. A couple of things I'd like to explore. First of all, and this is where I usually start our training actually, is ways that we can work on the main stage or the canvas or the slide itself. In the olden days, we were able to go into a view menu, which doesn't exist anymore. We also did have a drop-down menu, which is still here. And you'll see up in the top right-hand corner where it says best fit. And we can obviously go through and change some viewing angles or viewing percentages. You'll notice the shortcut keys here, which is great. So we've got control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those percentages are slightly different to what the original or the previous shortcut keys did, but all in all, it looks the same. And then control 0 will allow us to display the slide in the working area as best fit. What we could also do in the olden days is we could incrementally zoom out and zoom in. So for example, I could do control minus on the numeric keypad or control plus on the numeric keypad and zoom in and zoom out incrementally. Now, the numeric keypad doesn't work at all in this particular situation. And also the incremental zoom out and zoom in doesn't work when you're starting at best fit. So you do need to start at either control 1, which is 100%, or even control 2, which is 150%. And then you can do the incremental zoom in and zoom out. So now I'm doing control minus, but instead of using the numeric keypad, I'm using the minus key up next to the 0 along the top row of the keyboard. So control minus, and you'll see here I can zoom out. Now you'll see also if we go into the window menu, and you'll see here it says zoom in, control plus plus, which is basically control plus. Now if I do control plus, or if I'm using the top row of the keyboard, and I'm using plus, which is control shift equals, which is control plus, it doesn't work. So in actual fact, it's control equals, which incrementally zooms in along the top row of the keyboard, and control minus, which incrementally zooms out. Those keyboard shortcuts will not work if your starting point is control 0 for best fit. Oh, actually, look, it is. Maybe they have fixed that. There you go. You weren't able to do that in the olden days. So you can use those shortcut keys from any starting point, control minus and control equals, which can help if you want to quickly zoom in and zoom out. The next thing we're going to look at is what's going on the screen. And of course, if we pop open the timeline just by clicking once along this bar, and that will display the timeline. And then I can just do a control 0 to reset that zoom, or control minus a little bit to zoom out while the timeline is visible. Let's see what's going on here. So as I hover my mouse over parts of the screen, I can see that it's highlighting different components, such as where it says leadership communication. And as soon as I click on this text, it will open up the timeline, and we can see that we've got some groups in here. Now this is interesting because I did have a little bit of a play with this yesterday, and a couple of things to point out is that with this particular template anyway, is that I can't actually move anything around. It's pretty much locked in. So even trying to ungroup, and in the olden days we could right mouse click and ungroup, but we can't here. So there's no option of ungrouping that I can see yet. We'll keep an eye out for it. We can still control to a degree where things fit on the stage. Now there's a bit of a method to their madness here, because what we're going to explore or see shortly is that this canvas that we're building on is very much ready for a responsive experience. So let's just say it's responsive ready, and we're going to explore this shortly. What does that mean? Great question. We'll get to that in a moment. What I would like to point out in this particular template anyway is that if we go back and look at these individual components, I can control the timing of these components individually. And as you can see, I can adjust the timing or the timeline, but I can't actually adjust the appearance, like the positioning on the stage. I can adjust font size. So you can see here, I've got stock standard font size opportunities to change that, fonts, things like that. But as far as the display as to where these elements fit on the screen, we're a little bit limited. So what we need to do, and you'll see what happened there, I just actually, it's like a hierarchy. If you think of this particular example as a hierarchy of components. So if I go back and click on leadership communication, you'll see what it's done is it's selected a layer within the timeline, which at the moment is blue. Up in the top of the properties panel, you'll see here it says text 1178. So that's what we're dealing with at the moment. What we can do is we can rename that. So let's call this leadership communication, just for the name of our layer or our object on the stage. And there's a little double-headed arrow which is pointing to the left. Now what this is actually doing is it's reflecting a hierarchy of this object within a larger group. So when I click on this double-headed arrow, it's taking me back out to the larger group. And you can see here, what we've got is we've got this idea of a component. And at the moment, and we'll explore how to get this component in the first place, but what we've got is we've got a component which has a couple of elements that are included, and we can choose to turn components on and off. So if I don't want the title, I can turn the title on and off. Fortunately, it remembers the contents of that part of the component if I turn it on and off, which is great. So I might want to do a bit of experimenting here. Also, what we're looking at here is where it says 1, 2, 3, we've actually got the number of buttons we can include. And you'll see that as I'm changing this slider, it's actually adding those buttons on the timeline as separate objects, which can be controlled to a degree. But for example, I can't grab one of these buttons and actually move it around. Okay, so it is a little bit limited with that. Can I go more than 3? Great question. Can I type 5 in there, press enter? No. So I can only have up to 3 buttons, which probably reflects something along the lines of maybe a yes, no, maybe, or giving people an option to make a decision. So this component could certainly lend itself to being an interactive scenario-based component, or something where you're giving people a choice to make a decision. Let's move that back to 1. Let's click on card and see what's happening here. All that does is it is displaying that contents as a card. And what does that look like? Well, if we take the tick off card, you'll see that this tiny little option right down the bottom just disappeared. If I click on card again, that appears. So we can actually open up that element of the component, and we can now control that further. So if we wanted to change the color of the card, we wanted to change a drop shadow, you can see we've got some options for drop shadow. What other options? Shadow color. We can change some details around the measurements of that shadow. Can we change blur? Is there a blur option? Doesn't look like it. Oh, what's going on here? Padding. Okay. That's the padding within the card. So it's like a margin within the card. And I can't see anything to do with how much more we can control that shadow, but that's okay. I might take card off for a minute, take that back to what it was. What is this appearance controlling? That's the whole component. So you'll see here, you can have a card within the component. This is the whole component itself. A little bit limited on what we can actually do with this component. I can resize it to a degree. I can resize it up and down, but it's certainly not allowing me to resize it left and right, so to speak. And there is a reason for this, which we're going to get to shortly. One thing I did notice when I was working with the pre-release beta version is that if I had a component like this, for example, and then I wanted to play around with some design options to see, okay, well, what's going on here? Let's have a look and see some of these design options. Say this one, for example. So if I click on this design option, what was happening last time is if I said to myself, oh, I don't like that, I want to undo, Control Z, great, that works. I noticed when I was trying out some components in the pre-release, Control Z wouldn't take me back to the previous design. Sort of got a little bit confused or lost. So just keep an eye out for that if you're going to be playing around with some of these design options to see what's available, that you aren't relying on Control Z, or just double check Control Z to see if that's going to work before you work on some real live projects. That's the group, that's the component. We might actually rename this and we'll just call it component, just so we know that that's the component. And what happens if we go back out another step and we're now back at the slide properties? So you'll see something that's going on here, which is a little bit different to the previous version. We've got the ability to not only drill down, which we could do anyway, but we can obviously tap into individual components within broader groups or broader components, different elements, but we can navigate back out through a hierarchy, back out to the highest level, which in this case is the slide properties. And you can see in this case, they're just using an image to display the background. If I click on that image, nothing is happening. But if I click on the folder, it will allow me to pick some other images. You probably noticed there when I clicked on the folder, I can go to assets or system. System will obviously allow me to go into the computer to grab whatever I want to grab, or I go into assets, which is either internal assets, or there's stock library, which we can utilize as well. Let's change it to this one, replace image. Obviously it's grabbing that from the internet. How can we control this image? Well, there's a couple of options here. We can fit, we can fill, we can stretch, original size. So yeah, a couple of different options. That's pretty cool. I can't control the placement of that image on the slide. That would be nice if we had a little bit more control, say top left, bottom right, similar to what we were able to do with images in shapes. We'll see if we can do that back in shapes anyway, but at least, oh, here we go. We've got a tile. We can control that a little bit. So you might have a little bit of extra control over that functionality if you wanted to explore how that works. And then of course, if we wanted to change this component so the text was over on the right, we would need to probably change something along the alignment option and then change the horizontal padding. Let's change that to 300 and see what happens. Oh, that was probably a little bit too extreme, 50%. Okay, there we go, and change the right to say 10%. So we do have a little bit of control over how the padding works, or the positioning. So we can position the elements within a component by tapping into their alignment and spacing. Let's change this to about 300. Oh, actually, what was going on there? Say 300px. No, it doesn't like that. Maybe we've got to type it in as a percentage. I'm not sure what's happening there. Say 50. That's 50 pixels, 100 pixels, 200, doesn't like 200, 150. Interesting. Okay, I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of that. We can change the content width here. Oh, I've probably got to change the bottom. Okay, that's so 50. Let's try changing this back to 200. No, doesn't like it. Okay, we can possibly move this down. No, that doesn't work. Okay, there are things that we may be able to do to move that down if we wanted to. Let's just check this quickly. You'll notice along with the preview of different devices, in the preview option, we can get a quick preview in the development environment just by clicking on these buttons here, and which is great to be able to check things like font size and the like. And it would be interesting actually to quickly have a look and see if we can make adjustments to the text. So if I go back to desktop here, I can change the font, and let's have a look and see if I go into tablet. I can't change tablet font. Okay, there we go. Great. Okay, so I can change the size of the font. Here are the font sizes, desktop, tablet, and mobile. Okay, so we've got control over the font size based on the device, which is great. So just remembering that we can do that is awesome. So these are the different font sizes, DT and M there. We will explore that in more detail, but some interesting stuff. The next thing we're going to have a look at is, let's have a look at the next screen here, because this is where it's going to start to get a little bit interesting, because we have some bullets. Now, for those of you who have worked in PowerPoint, you've probably animated bullets before, one by one or one bullet by one bullet. And my biggest gripe with Captivate in the past is that we couldn't animate bullets or introduce bullets one point at a time. You'll see here that we've got some text, which is part of a group. That's fine. We don't have to worry about the group at the moment. Similar to what we were working with before, we've got a hierarchy, which you'll see here, similar type of component by the looks of it, where we've got image, caption, subtitle, button, and card. Not quite the same, because the other component that we looked at had title and subtitle, and then body, I think. Let's have a look. Back out a level. Yeah, title, subtitle, body, and buttons. And this component looks like it's got image, caption, subtitle, button, and card. So if we take card off, you'll see that we are able to change the appearance of it quite quickly. So I'll put the card back on. A couple of other things going on here, which we will have a look at in more detail as we explore. But let's have a look and see how we can animate the bullet points. Because at the moment, if you remember from the preview, this didn't really animate that well because it's allowing us to animate. But what we can do is, while we've got this text selected, if we go over to the right-hand side here, and we've got an animation option or button. So let's click on that, and you'll see that will change the panel over on the right-hand side to display the animation options. Now we've got a lot of different animation options here, which is all very well. I'll let you explore those in your own time. Fade in is fine for now, but let's have a look at the drum roll, please. Brand new option where we can change the way that text is animated. Let's have a look and see what happens here. Let's try by line. And you can test that straight away inside. That wasn't too revealing. Let's try by bullet. Okay, so what that means is the text is in there already. Just do it. Okay, so by bullet, this is interesting. So what we might need to do is look at yeah, that's quite fast, but we'd obviously slow that down a little bit. Even though it says slow, we might want to make that slide a little bit longer. And let's have a look and see what's happening here. Still not very... Something worth pointing out is if you do a preview, just a stock standard preview from up here, it will preview from the slide you are on by default. You don't have any other options to preview from the beginning, or so you will need to make sure you're at the beginning of the project if you want to preview the project. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's preview this in the browser, and you'll see that it will display the animation. So we'd probably have to have a little bit of a play around with that, but at least it's got the option to animate per line or per bullet. We might need to break that down a little bit more to have a little bit more control over that animation, but hey, it's a really good start, and it's good to see that Captivate has caught up with what would be expected these days. A couple of other things here is that slide with the overlay, and it looks like what was happening similar to if you worked with interactive video in the previous version of Captivate. It would go along, it looks like there's a bookmark here, and then it's adding the overlay, which is shown over on the left hand side by a smaller tile, and it has overlay or overlay written on it. That's obviously the name that they've given that particular slide. I could change that to Team Details Overlay, and you'll see that that's just updated the slide title there. Lots going on with regards to interactions, which we'll explore in further detail. Look, I'm going to leave it there for now as a first of many deep dives into the software, but I just really wanted to give a quick little overview of some of the things that jumped out at me as I was really starting to explore the new version. We haven't even started to explore what's going over here on the left hand side, and we haven't really looked at the new timeline, not that it looks that new, and we haven't really explored the condensed menu option, of which I'm sure there's a reason for that as well. I'm going to bid farewell now. Please check the video description below for components within this video to be able to quickly jump back and view certain parts. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video of our series that explores the new version of Captivate. Thanks for watching.